Hello and welcome to my second lecture as such for this book project, Journeys in the Dreamtime, my new and most recent project book. I've tried to keep I'm going to try and keep the video short. I said that before, and I'm going to look at a particular subject or a couple of subjects that relate to a chapter in the same part of the book I talked about last time I was on here. So if you like what I do, and you like the kind of information I'm talking about, don't forget to share or click the link and subscribe as you would for YouTube. So one of the things that fascinates me as an image maker or an artist as such is the idea of duality. And there's a couple of chapters in the book. One is called the origins of symbols, and another one is called symbols of duality. And I try and look at this from an artistic, esoteric, I would say almost a shamanic viewpoint, even though I wouldn't claim to be a shaman as such. So I'm trying to understand the imagery, and I'm trying to understand some of the religious significance to it, and how we have certain terms and how things are portrayed in paintings, in rock art, in petroglyphic pieces, things that you'd see on cave paintings as well, as I looked at in the book. And in the past I've talked about duality and I've talked about images, and one in particular image or symbolism that relates to this image in general is something that relates to the Alpha and Omega, which go back to the idea of creation and the beginning and the end as such. But there's also the duality in this. There's the understanding of duality and how we as human beings have these two-sided aspects, our light side and our shadow side. And how this is something that we often neglect. And when I look back at religious iconography and I look at some of the petroglyphs, like the symbols relating to the Hopi Indians, the splitting of what they call the creator, the supreme divinity, and the idea of these two entities, one was called Kokopelli, or is called Kokopelli, and the other one Masawa, which I talk massively about in Orion's Door in relation to Orion symbolism, which is all part of this story anyway, and how the splitting, the two, is really an aspect of the one, the divine being. So to understand the one, you have to understand the two halves as such, to keep it simple. So the shadow side in some of the cave paintings and the rock art relates to death. In a general term, relates to death, but not physical death necessarily, but the darker aspects of the things that we don't want to face. Whereas the lighter aspects, the light, can relate to life and relate to growth and all those things that would also be the flowering and the beginning of something, whereas death is seen as the end of something from certain perspective points of view. That's not always the case though, is it? Because if you think about it, death can be the beginning and life can also be what seems like to be an end, depending on our duality and how we look at different aspects of ourselves. And I was fortunate enough many years ago to spend some time with a wonderful photographer friend who was also very much connected to the Native American Indians over in America. And he was quite a well-known journalist, or a journalist photographer, the late Dan Budnick, and I spent several times seeing him and talking to him about his work and his photographs and the things that he'd shared with me. And it's interesting that when you go around the world like he did, photographing, looking for evidence of this understanding of duality through art, it comes up in all sorts of places. He even found it as far as Norway, in terms of rock art and Bronze Age art. You only have to go to Egypt and you'll see the understanding of this with, the image of Set and Horus being connected. And they represent this duality of light and darkness again, and the idea that they both are needed to be able to turn the world, to create the world. And in some terms it's called Horus and Set, turning the drill, or turning the world. And what creates the physical world is this understanding of this duality. The graveyard at Rennes-le-Château, with a huge mystery associated to it relating to the bloodline of Jesus and the bloodline of Magdalena, and the mysteries of the Saunier the priest and the Priory of Sion, which I'm not going to go into in this video. Do another video on that at some point. But the idea of the cult behind that, and the cults themselves, the religious cults, and why they would put this symbolism over this particular green door on a graveyard in that part of France, which clearly has a symbol of life and death on it. And the cross is another symbol that relates to that, and especially the skull and crossbone, which relates to the four cults again, and the four aspects coming out of, swirling out of the central divinity. So I talk about that in more detail. Also, when you think about it, the idea of the seasons and the change in the seasons, and the two, winter and summer, or spring and autumn, at different points of the cross on the wheel, these are all aspects of ourselves as well. So we have our own phases, we have our own periods, where we go inwards. We have inward cycles, Geamos and Siamos in the Celtic tradition, where the yin and the yang, where we turn in the cycles. These are all parts of our nature, of who we are. And again, we have the darker aspects of ourselves, which relates to, you could say, relates to Saturnalia. It could relate to the period from Halloween through to Imbolc, maybe. I'm not saying that's the case, but that could be the case. And on the flip side, the Ostara period in the pagan calendar, and the return of the light of the earth and the sun, raising the growth of everything on the planet, could relate to the outward cycle. And again, that's another side of ourselves. Same chapter, I talk about this this cross of ages, and the movement of the 4 points, the 4 directions, as we know it in indigenous cultures. Like I said earlier, autumn, winter, summer, spring is one aspect of it, but you also have these other cycles, and also color symbolism that relates also to the same teachings and same knowledge, word, symbol, color, that kind of thing, which is like studying alchemy. Anything ecclesiastical and the pagan symbolism are all connected through that same thread of knowledge. So I've charted out in the book the this understanding from my viewpoint as a creator, as an image maker, as a person interested in deeper symbolism. I call them different roads as they branch off this, and we have, as part of the duality, or the movement, the yin and yang, we have the black to blue road, and we have the white to yellow road. And this symbolism I broke down by studying lots of books and looking at this mythology, which are personified through planets and stars, quite often as gods and goddesses, as the whirling rainbow, as well. What happens a lot, I've noticed as well, through my work, is that, and we've all fallen victim to this, but we tend to avoid the darker aspects of ourselves purely to focus on the light. And how many times do you hear that in the New Age and in all those places where people say, no, it's too dark, don't go there, we don't want to talk about that. It's too traumatic in many ways, because it triggers people into thinking about deeper aspects of what's going on within their own reality and what's happened to them possibly in their own life, at some point. So there's this deeper understanding, this psychology, which, like Carl Jung called shadow work, or the shadow side, which is very important, especially as an artist, especially as a shaman. If you were that kind of figure, or you were doing that kind of work on yourself, then you would understand that you have to delve into the darker aspects and face them and look at them and try and understand what it is and heal them in many ways, what is going on. So anyway, I hope you found that interesting, most of that, and I'll be doing more of these short videos just to tease you into looking into the book and getting more out of it. and hopefully you'll come back and watch more. Anyway, thank you for listening, and don't forget to subscribe, and I appreciate everybody that listens to me and is interested in my paintings and the work that I do. Okay, thanks a lot.